Alright, I've been watching the Caribbean edition of the UEFA Nations League and quite enjoying it, and it sort of inspired me to get my Caribbean shirts out of the cupboard and have a look at them. Thought maybe we could have a talk about some of the teams involved, so yeah, here they are. First up we've got Bermuda. Bermuda, one of the better teams traditionally in the Caribbean region, maybe not so much at the moment, but it was watching them beat Saint Martin 12-0 last night that inspired me to get all these shirts out of the cupboard, really. They've got Naki Wells playing for them, although he didn't yesterday, but they obviously didn't need him. Historically, they also had Sean Gota, used to play for Man City, bit of a cult player. Feed the goat and he will score, that's what they used to say. Next up, Bahamas. Bahamas, not one of the better nations historically in the Caribbean. Terrible, in fact. First place that Columbus set foot in the New World, as they called it back in the day. And, yeah, currently the worst football team in the world. Joint with Turks and Caicos Islands. Now, I love Turks and Caicos. Part with Bahamas of the Lucayan Archipelago, apparently. And they're the only two parts of it, and they are both not very good at football, so I don't know what they're doing in that part of the world. Turks and Caicos have been bottom of the rankings for a very long time. They did crawl a few places after beating British Virgin Islands fairly recently, but they have fallen back down again. One of the things I love about them is their amazing crest, which features flamingos, and a conch, and a top hat, and a pelican. Because why? Who knows? Lovely shirt, cyan and red, not really an obvious combination. I met a girl from Turks and Caicos once when I worked in the library. She wanted help photocopying her passport, and when I saw it I said, "You're from Turks and Caicos, they're the worst football team in the world." And she wasn't really very impressed with that, and I had to explain that actually that's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, although not really that good a thing. Next up, Cayman Islands. Never done anything really remarkable football wise, and yeah, more known for money laundering really. So moving swiftly on, Cuba. Now again, these are better, a lot better than Cayman Islands. Historically, Cuba have been pretty good. They, in fact, were at the 1938 World Cup, first Caribbean team to be at the World Cup. Although it wasn't hard back in those days to get into a World Cup, I think you basically just had to phone up FIFA and say, "I'm a country, let me play," and they said, "Okay, you're in." They regularly qualify for the CONCACAF Gold Cup, which is, you know, CONCACAF's main kind of regional tournament, and when they do, it's normally in the USA, and the Cuban players normally abscond, so hooray. Yeah, next up, Dominican Republic. Now that is a great shirt. I'm a big fan of this. We're looking at the teams in the Greater Antilles at the moment, by the way, which is sort of kind of nearer the top of the Caribbean chain. Dominican Republic, okay, not one of the better teams, not one of the worst teams. Yeah, half of the island of Hispaniola, along with Haiti, who's the other half of the island of Hispaniola. Now Haiti are sort of one of the powerhouses of the Caribbean, or traditionally they always have been. They were the second Caribbean team to get to the World Cup, 1974. They were at the Copa America in 2016, when there was a sort of centenary one where they let in a lot of kind of bizarre non-South American teams, and Haiti were one of them. Historically they have great shirts, and this is perhaps not one of the best, but it's okay. Yeah, good regional team. Speaking of regional heavyweights, Jamaica. Now you might recognise this if you know much about cult shirts. This is their away shirt from 1998 World Cup, where they were the third Caribbean team to ever qualify for the World Cup. And I was a huge fan of that team, and a huge fan of this shirt. The home shirt's great, but the away shirt is better. It's an absolute beaut. They've also been runners-up in the last two Gold Cups, which is pretty amazing, really, for a team from the Caribbean. You know, that's above the likes of, you know, Mexico and other bigger teams. Another Jamaica shirt here. This is one that was match worn by Marvin Elliott in a World Cup qualifier. And in fact, I need to give it back to him. True story. Puerto Rico next. Never much good, really. Puerto Rico, this weird relationship with the US of A, where, you know, when it suits the US, they're friends, and when it doesn't, they just kind of ignore them and don't help them very much. Yeah, I don't know if you watch the news, maybe you might know. Okay, so, moving on to the Lesser Antilles, which doesn't seem very nice to call anyone lesser, but you know, some great teams here. First of all, we're going to have a look at the Windward Islands, who have got their own tournament. 4 of the teams from the Windward Islands. It's held kind of sporadically. Sometimes it's every year, sometimes it's every 2 years. This is Dominica. This is a match one shirt. Again, one of the great badges of global football, with a parrot and yeah, stars and stuff. I mean, yeah, don't know. Anyway, that's Dominica. Grenada. I'm a big fan of Grenada as well, having watched them in the Gold Cup 2011, which was where I first discovered the Gold Cup, and I watched every single game of that tournament, supporting Grenada all the way, although they were not very good. And then afterwards it came out that there were allegations that they may have been match fixing, diddling some of the games, and I wasn't very impressed with them after that. Spice Boys, that's what they call the Grenadian team. And they're the current holders of the Windward Islands tournament title. But that didn't stop them losing 10-0 to Curacao a couple of weeks ago. St Lucia, this one's match one by a awesome guy called Cliff Valsin, who I got in touch with over Facebook. And there you go, he sent me a shirt, signed it for me. Magnum, that's his nickname. Striker, scored quite a few goals for the national team. Doesn't seem to be getting called up at the moment, but guy's a legend. One of the first players to actually help me out on this football shirt quest, so good on him. And that's another St Lucia shirt. This one just a replica. They have great shirts. I mean, St Lucia looks like a great place. It's beautiful. I mean, Google it and have a look at the Pitons, which are these kind of mountains that rise out of the sea next to this amazing rainforest. Yes, and the final team that compete in this tournament are St Vincent and the Grenadines, who sound like they should be a band, I've always thought. Vincey Heat, that's their nickname. Don't ask me what that's about. Maybe it's like Deep Heat, but yes, who knows. So I've got a couple of St Vincent and the Grenadines shirts. And then there are a couple of teams that are technically in the Windward Islands, but don't seem to get invited to the tournament. Barbados being one of them. And yeah, I mean, they're one of the better Caribbean teams at the moment, Barbados, to be honest. They famously drew 1-1 with Northern Ireland in 2004, so I'm on the Irish. Narn. Trinidad and Tobago, who were the 4th team from the Caribbean to qualify for the World Cup. And again, kind of heavyweight in the Caribbean region. It was World Cup 2006 they got to, and they've had loads of famous players over the years. Dwight York, Kenwyn Jones, Stern John, Russell Latterby. They're just a few that played in the UK. And this is signed by some of those players. In fact, I think Stern John did sign it. So, yeah, anyway, lovely stuff. So, you've got the Windward Islands, and then you've got the Leeward Islands, which is what we're going to look at now. They're a bit further down the chain again, and there are a few more of them. This is Anguilla. Anguilla are perennially dreadful, and they were the team that ended up bottom of the rankings when Turks and Caicos managed to crawl their way off the bottom for a very small amount of time. Still dreadful. Yeah, so it's kind of a home shirt, and this is the home shirt. That's the 3rd shirt. That one's a match worn as well, I think, by the ladies' team. Next up, Antigua and Barbuda. They were one of the better teams in the region for a while, kind of around qualifying for 2014, World Cup 2014 kind of time. And they had Super Dexter Blackstock playing for them, who was playing for my team, Nottingham Forest, at the time. And I became a bit of an Antigua and Barbuda fan for a while when Super Dex was playing for them. They've slipped down a bit again recently, but they did beat Bahamas 6-0 yesterday, so they're not that bad. British Virgin Islands, they are that bad. One of the worst teams in the world, have been for a long time. Even Turks and Caicos have beaten British Virgin Islands in the last few years. I mean, really, really not good. Really a not good team at all in the slightest. But, you know, lovely green and yellow shirts, so can't really argue with that. And here are their only slightly less dreadful cousins, the US Virgin Islands. And they're really not much better. Only, to me personally, only really notable for having fielded a 46-year-old called MacDonald Taylor Sr. in a game in 2004. And I think you know that a team's not really taking things very seriously if they're chucking, you know, 46-year-olds onto the pitch. But that's the kind of hilarity that I like, so hooray. This is brilliant. This is a Montserrat shirt. Montserrat, it's one of the hardest shirts to get in the whole of world football, really, and this is a lovely signed one brought back to me from a match by a guy called Dean Mason, who plays for the team. Dean Mason, legend. He was playing for Lowestoft Town at the time, and I just messaged him on Facebook. Didn't expect anything. I watched, they were playing Curaçao two-legged, and I watched both legs, and a few days later I got a Facebook message, and it was Dean, and he said he'd brought me back a shirt. So absolute legend. Thank you, Mr. Mason. You are a gentleman. And finally, in the Lesser Antilles, St Kitts and Nevis. Now, St Kitts and Nevis are a team who punch above their weight. 50,000 people on that island, which is not a lot. It's a quarter of the population of Aberdeen, to put it into perspective. But they really consistently seem to do pretty well. I watched them draw 0-0 with Canada a few years ago, which is, if you think about their relative sizes, that's quite amazing. Their first Nations League match was against Puerto Rico, and I couldn't sleep, so I got up in the middle of the night and watched it. And they won 1-0 with a goal in the 91st minute. And you've got to love the fact that they have a brown booby on their badge, which is a kind of bird rather than a medical condition. Okay, so now I thought maybe we'll have a look at the French territories. This is Martinique. Martinique are not in FIFA. In fact, none of these French overseas territories are in FIFA because the French will not allow it. Or FIFA will not allow it, or somebody somewhere stopping them anyway. But apart from the fact that they're not allowed in FIFA, they're actually pretty good. They qualify for the CONCACAF Gold Cup fairly regularly. Guadeloupe, they're in the same boat as well, obviously. French overseas, they've been to a few Gold Cups as well. 3 between 2007 and 2011. They qualified for every Gold Cup. They always have pretty great shirts. I mean, I like this one. It's kind of mad asymmetrical tricolour design. And quite a good badge as well. You've got to enjoy that. I don't know if that's a dandelion or what. Never really thought about it before. Anyway, and French Guiana. Now, French Guiana made the news in the last CONCACAF Gold Cup for fielding Florent Malouda. They were told that they weren't allowed, but they did it anyway because he had 80 caps for France. FIFA got very angry with them. CONCACAF got very annoyed with them, and their results were declared void, and so on. But nice shirt, big fan of this. If you want, you can get totally fake ones made by an Australian in his bedroom off eBay. But this one's actually match worn. I think it's one of the ways you can tell is that the sleeves have been cut off with scissors. I mean, this, maybe you can't tell there, but obviously that was just the way the player liked it. Moving on to the Dutch territories, or ex-Dutch territories. This is Aruba. Pretty much generally rubbish, to be honest, but again, nice shirt. And this was actually the last shirt from the Caribbean region that I got. I knew it was coming. I knew Admiral had got them, and eventually they would be replicas. And when it eventually happened, I was very happy indeed. And this is Curaçao. Now, Curaçao are well good. They took Netherlands Antilles' place in FIFA when they dissolved in 2010, 2011. And yeah, I mean, out of all the Caribbean teams, Curaçao are really pretty decent. They're 81st in the world at the moment. Made it to the last Gold Cup. They did lose all their games, but still. Yeah, they have won 10-0 and 5-0 so far in their Nations League games. So, yeah, they're not really a team to be trifled with. And they've actually got players who are playing for Leicester and Reading and Stoke and Oldham, so, you know, they've got some experience, those guys. They're not a bad group of players at all. Now, getting on to the South American mainland, you have got Suriname. I mean, this is a belter of a shirt. Huge fan of this shirt. Suriname, formerly part of Holland, got their independence, and famously they have produced, or their parents from Suriname, of a load of players who've played for the Dutch national team. Ruud Gullit, Frank Rijkaard, Edgar Davids, Clarence Seedorf, Patrick Kluivert, Ryan Babel, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, loads more. They've all got kind of Suriname heritage, so they could have fielded a pretty good team on their own, you would imagine. But yeah, so moving on to the final team, Guyana. It used to be British Guyana a long time ago, before they got their independence. They've had loads of off-field problems in the last few years. They went for a couple of years without playing a game. I believe FIFA sent their normalisation committee in, so they're still kind of recovering from that. And this is another guy on a shirt, and you just gotta love a shirt that's a flag shirt, right? I mean, I do. It's ridiculous, but it's ace. Big fan of that. So, I've got all of the Caribbean teams that are in FIFA and a few more, but there are a few that I would still quite like. If you have any idea how to help me get a Bonaire shirt or a Saint Martin shirt, that would be great. Okay, well, I'm off to watch some games because I believe Turk and Caicos are playing right now. See ya!